Hi, Mattt.
Thank you so much. It's an honor to be here. I've just been blown away by conversations I've had with y'all throughout the day. So much intelligence and passion and kindness. It's truly wonderful to be here. It does feel a bit weird to be up here kind of as the closer for this iOS day of this mobile developer conference because, can I be honest with you? It's been, this is a safe space, right? I honestly haven't been feeling it lately with mobile, right? I kind of got off the ride a few years ago, and I've just been sort of disenchanted. So yeah, but it wasn't always this way. When I first started, my first job out of college, like the iPhone had just come out. I was working in Tokyo for this startup that essentially was for Japanese businessmen to learn English, but there was this CTO and this head of product, and they had this vision for the product to become this platform for you to learn anything. So languages, but also math, geography, music, trivia, you name it. The basic idea is this. Spaced repetition is the best way for us humans to learn new concepts. There's this guy, Ebbinghaus, in the 1880s that figured out that our brains, our memory, has a logarithmic decay. So if I teach you a new concept, for example, that the Japanese word for dog is inu, so dog, perfect. You'll forget that in like a couple minutes. Unless I'm prompted to ask you again, and then you remember. So dog, Konpeki. So that's spaced repetition. And when I first joined the company, we had just finished rewriting the app. It was a PHP app. We rewrote it into Ruby on Rails, and I was working on that for the first couple months. But then our leadership thought, you know what? It's kind of annoying to have to be at a computer to study, right? What if on our commutes on the subway, we could practice on our phones? We could practice a few minutes here and there, and then a little bit every day, and then eventually become experts in anything, right? So I ended up working on that for a while. We launched it. It was a small hit. It was really great. And I used it every day on my commute, going the 3 stops on the Yamanote line from Gotanda, where my apartment was, to the office in Shibuya. And it's a good thing, too, because I went to Japan knowing absolutely no Japanese. Like, for real. I thought the word for no was neko desu, which, it means I'm a cat or there's a cat. How on earth did I think that was the way to say no? Well, I thought I was saying kekko desu, which is also not right. That just means that's enough. I've got bad information. I don't know why I didn't check that. Everybody I interacted with for the first month thought I was a lunatic, which might explain why I didn't know anybody or I had trouble making friends there at first. But I did have this other app on my phone, and it was wonderful. It had an overlay of spots that you could visit in Japan. And it was submitted by other people that were there. And you could check in to those spots, and every place you went, you got a stamp in your virtual passport. And they had these digital collectibles that you could pick up and drop off. It was really, really cool. I loved that app. I loved it so much that I ended up moving to Austin, Texas to work on it full time. And then within a few years, the company got bought by Facebook, and the whole company sort of liquidated. So I had to find something else to work on. Oh, right, dog. Oh, God. So spaced repetition, that's why software is better at that. I'm sharing all of this not because I want you to know my autobiography, but to give you some context on just what got me into mobile development. It's this idea that apps can be, as Steve Jobs once said, the bicycle of the mind, a way to augment reality, a way to better yourself. It's a way to explore the world. And I haven't felt that in a while, but I'm starting to feel kind of similar vibes. So this is all kind of teeing up for the actual subject of my talk, which is virtual reality, of all things. So I thought a lot about these days gone by in Tokyo and Texas, and I don't think it's just nostalgia. I think like my gut is trying to tell me something, and that's that it's feeling a lot like 2008 right now. Let's just compare the facts. So in 2008, we were suffering a global economic crisis. Beijing just hosted the Olympics, and Apple released a revolutionary new product. And here in 2022, the world is suffering another economic crisis. Beijing hosted the Olympics, and Apple is just about to announce a revolutionary new product. Now, I have no idea what this is going to be, but if the rumor sites are to be believed, in January, Apple will be releasing something called the Reality Pro. I guess. It's supposed to run on an M2 chip and run something called Reality OS. We've seen the mention of Reality OS in the SDKs. We expect that this will launch sometime in January, cost a few $1,000, maybe ship 1.5 million units. Should be a big hit. Around the same time, Sony will be announcing the PSVR 2, so the follow-up to its successful gaming peripheral on the PS5. And then there's Linux comes to the virtual reality desktop. So 2023 will be the year of the Linux on the virtual reality headset. But you don't have to wait until then, because actually next month, and we saw leaks in the last couple of days, Meta is going to announce the Meta Quest Pro, which is kind of the next generation. It's Project Cambria, if you're following the space. It's going to be a little bit more expensive than their current headset, but it's going to have some really important features. And even before then, the parent company of ByteDance might be, or parent company of TikTok, ByteDance, might be releasing the Pico 4. Might start exclusive to Europe, that's the rumor I heard, but that should be like a next generation Quest at a similar price point. So there have been a lot of headsets since the Oculus Rift came out in 2016, so why should any of us care about it? Well, I think there are three main reasons. The first is that these VR headsets will all have full color pass-through, which will give you sort of seamless integration of what you're actually looking at in the room around you with virtual reality overlay. We call it mixed reality. The second is that these will all feature eye tracking. So for the first time, everybody will be able to make eye contact with each other, and you can see where people are looking. It makes a big difference in nonverbal communication. And on the same vein, it'll be the first time that we have facial tracking as well. So you can make emotions, you can project your emotions and use your face as like an input device, which is cool. That's a weird way of putting it, isn't it? you can be like a person in virtual reality. We all know that Apple is not the first to release a new product in a new category, right? They only jump in when they're ready to make something that is accessible to everybody and they can make the best in class. So if the rumors are true and Apple is about to enter the space, that should be a strong signal to all of us that something big is about to happen. So imagine you had a time machine and you could go back to the year 2010. What would you do differently knowing what you know now, right? I suppose most of us would load up on Bitcoin and Apple stock. That's the first thing to do. But what would you make? Knowing what you know now, you would have a decade head start for everybody in the world. What would you make? What would you make to fix this broken timeline that we're living in? So that's my challenge to you. The point of my talk is to saying that we are living in the future past. Before VR replaces mobile as the defining technology of the era. And I've come here to ask all of you, what are you going to do? Most of us aren't experts in VR, and even if we were, we certainly have nothing on the time travelers visiting us here right now from 2030. So what can we do? Well, that's what we're going to do for the rest of the talk. We're going to explore what VR is and what we can think, how we should be thinking about it. And the first kind of fundamental question is, what is VR? Right? And that seems like kind of an obvious one, but I mean, the question, what is mobile, is still kind of an open question, right? We can start with hardware. That's not a bad place to start, but mobile doesn't just mean it's an app running on a phone, because, tablets exist. But if tablets count, then like a tablet with a keyboard is just like a laptop, so laptops must count. But if you're thinking about laptops, like what about the watch? Is that mobile? And like CarPlay, that's certainly mobile. I don't know, what is this mobile thing? So I think the best way to think about mobile is not as a binary, it is or it isn't, but rather as a spectrum. You have a spectrum between fixed and fluid contexts, and the hardware is what enables you to achieve a more fluid context. And in that respect, VR is the next step along that spectrum. That hardware has allowed us to expand what's possible over time. So not maybe your conventional definition of a mobile app, but Shazam. It was created back in 2000 and, anybody want to guess? 2002. How on earth did that work, right? The iPhone came out in 2007, 2008. If your phone looked like that, how are you going to use Shazam, right? Well, here's how. I had to look this up because I'd never used Shazam. I was not allowed to. My mom would have killed me because it cost 99 cents, billed right to your cell phone bill. You would dial a short code, 2580, you'd hit send, and they would connect. And you'd hold your phone up in the air, and then after 30 seconds, the call would disconnect, and you'd get a text message. And maybe if it worked, you'd get the title and artist and album, right? But on an iPhone, of course, you can just download the app. I think it might have cost like $5 at a certain point. Now it's free. Of course, it's built into the OS. And there were a bunch of apps like this. Like there was this thing called Movie Phone that you could dial to get the movie times, but Fandango replaced that. Now you can use that to buy tickets. Now that movie theaters are a thing that really exists anymore, I guess. There's banking. There used to be telephone banking. You'd call in and you could ask questions, but of course, mobile apps have replaced that. And then classic example is taxi dispatches, totally replaced by Uber and Lyft and all of those apps. So getting back to the question, what is VR? Well, let's talk about terminology, right? So we have VR, it's kind of a lot of alphabet soup, right? We have VR, which is virtual reality, AR, augmented reality. Nobody says MR, but it's mixed reality, somewhere between those two things, and you could abbreviate it MR. And then you have this thing called extended reality. So how do we make sense of all this? Well, if you want to create a taxonomy, you would say that maybe AR and VR are, along a spectrum of immersion, where VR is the most immersive, whereas AR is try to project onto reality. And somewhere in the middle, we call that mixed reality, and we could draw a circle around everything and call that extended reality, XR. And the industry seems to be rallying around this term of XR. We have OpenXR, which is from the Kronos group, the same folks that are stewards of the OpenGL standard. We have WebXR from the W3C. And fortunately, at the moment, all of the major vendors support these standards. And of course, that's going to change, perhaps, hopefully not, when Apple enters the arena. But, maybe they'll make us work twice as hard to get the same experience everywhere. So another way to think about VR is to contrast it against AR. VR headsets are constrained by performance, whereas AR headsets are constrained by comfort. And each generation of hardware, the VR headsets get more and more comfortable, while the AR headsets get a little bit more capable. And over time, they're going to converge. Eventually, this distinction might not make any sense, and it would just be sort of a range of different devices, the same way that we think about a desktop and a laptop being fundamentally the same thing, just different sizes and form factors. So right now, VR is more comfortable than AR is capable. And so we're going to see the first examples of mixed reality being a use case of these VR headsets. So in the Quest Pro, in the Apple Reality headsets. And that's why most AR applications right now are running on your phone, right? And that's the funny thing about all of this, is that until now, like, VR and AR, it's basically just strapping a phone to your face. We've been sort of piggybacking on the technology that we have in our pocket for so long, but this next generation is where we kind of break from that and we start to make things that are special for these new mediums. I think even still, the hardware and the taxonomy only get us so far. If you'll indulge me for a moment, I'd like to take kind of a bizarre tangent and talk about hamburgers. So let's say we're cruising around in our time machine and we all of a sudden have like a sudden craving for a Big Mac. What's the earliest year that we could all travel together and get Big Macs at scale? So what's the earliest year that we could make a couple hundred Big Macs? So I'm proud to say, as a person who grew up in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, the Big Mac is an invention of a Pittsburgh suburb franchise. So they announced that in like the late 1960s. But certainly, like, the idea of a hamburger is not too crazy, right? If you know the recipe, we could do it a little bit earlier. How much earlier? I think it's a lot less early than you'd think. I'm not a hamburger historian, but I think like the earliest you could get a Big Mac at scale is the year 1870. Now, why is that? Well, if we're in 1870s America, I think that's the first time that you can get all of the ingredients in the same place. So two all beef patties, special sauce, lettuce, cheese, pickles, onion on a sesame seed bun, right? That is, to get all of that, you need infrastructure. It's only in the 1870s that you can get railroads with refrigerated boxcars that can move meat that was packed in Chicago to the same place where you get wheat from the from the Middle West. You can go get cheese from the Great Lakes region. You can get lettuce from the Southwest. You can get tomatoes from the Southeast. You can get sesame seeds imported through Atlantic ports. This is the first time in history where you can make such a sandwich at scale. So why am I talking about that? Well, I think Carl Sagan kind of gave you the best example of this when he gave his recipe for an apple pie. If you want to make an apple pie, you have to invent the universe first. The next generation of VR is only possible thanks to all of these technologies coming together. Without battery tech, you can't have the form factor. Without CPUs or GPUs, you can't make the immersion. Without display technology, you get it, right? You need all of these things all at once. But when we have all these things all at once, it only reveals a deeper problem, which is, how on earth are we going to fill VR, right? If you think about VR as like a sparse matrix that stretches out in infinite dimension, like infinite space in 3 dimensions at least, then how are we going to do that? I don't think we can do that with human hands alone, right? There simply aren't enough people that are using Maya and Blender and all these tools. That would take way too long. At the same time, though, of course, we've had this revolution in AI-generated images in the last 2 years. It's been like in the last 2 months, it's been crazy, right? So we have this project like NVIDIA, only one of their projects is like NERF. So right, you can take still images and do 3D scene reconstructions. You have similar research out of Switzerland from the Reality Graphics Lab, which can iteratively refine these models into something that looks really great. We have, of course, MetaHuman from Epic, which is capable of producing an endless variety of photorealistic humans to meet any profile that you want. They can emote. They're humans, basically. And now you have this new generation of diffusion-based AI image generation, like DALL-E, Stable Diffusion, and Midjourney. And with them, you could do things like generate an infinite variety of clothing to project onto these metahumans. So this starts to take care of the problem. You can have AI assisted by humans filling up this new metaverse. So just as the printing press means nothing without ink and paper, the metaverse can't exist without the things to fill it, right? And it's in talking about the printing press that creates a good segue. The 20th century media critic, Marshall McLuhan, had this pithy expression. It's the title of his book, "The medium is the message." And when he says that, he meant to say that what you can say in a communication medium is dictated by what the medium is. So the extreme example is that a society that only has smoke signals to communicate by probably is not going to create great works of philosophy or drama, right? Or consider this very presentation that I'm giving right now. The medium has hard constraints on time, which I'm quickly running low on. But if I was conveying the same information in a blog post or a book, I might be able to dedicate many paragraphs or chapters to any of the individual points I'm trying to make in this talk. That's not to say that any one medium is better than another. They're just different. And it's in understanding these differences that we can understand what kind of communication is possible. So, VR game developers have been at the front lines of understanding all of the challenges of this new medium. For example, in a conventional game, you press A to do things, right? You can attack the enemy, you can open a door, you can sell an item, do a dance. But in VR, you have to do the thing, right? That's kind of awkward. Like how do you instruct people to do things? How do you level up people if they aren't getting better at it? Or here's another example. In conventional video games, it's more like movies, right? You can focus their attention on a particular thing. But how do cutscenes work? How do you make sure that the user is actually looking at what they need to look at the moment if you can't force them to a particular perspective, because that's totally disorienting? So, speaking of movies, I think I'd like to offer this analogy to you. Let's see if this is helpful. Film is to TV as VR is to AR. So both film and TV involve the creation of apparent movement by playing a sequence of images at a high rate, in the same way that AR and VR are fundamentally the same kind of technology. You're putting pixels in front of your eyes. So, film is viewed in a private context, whereas TV is broadcast everywhere, often in a background of public spaces. Films are discrete and self-contained, whereas TV is a stream of content. Film is watched in a single setting in a single sitting, whereas TV in multiple. We say it's binging when you watch multiple TV episodes at once. Film is serious and immersive, it's artistic, whereas TV was initially vapid, but it's become more film-like over time. And film is premium. You have to buy a ticket to go in and see it, whereas TV is often just wherever. It's everywhere, but you're often paying for it with your attention to advertisements. So if we take that analogy seriously, I think the dichotomy kind of lines up really well. VR is a discrete experience that you pay to have, whereas AR is going to be this continuous stream of information projected onto where you are. VR, like film, predates AR, and I think over time it'll converge that way. So that begs the question, right? What kind of communication will VR make possible? What will it make impossible? To virtually go anywhere and be anyone, will it make us more empathic, more understanding, or will it further weaken the ties we have with our immediate communities? Will it make us lose all sense of self in reality? Probably both. Probably some other things too. If I'm really worried about anything, though, it's probably AR. TV may have been a downgrade from the written medium that it replaced, but AR could be much worse. This is a wonderful film called Hyperreality. Look it up if you haven't seen it. It's maybe the most disturbing take, like a really plausible take of what AR would actually look like in practice. But it's up to us to decide. That's the whole point of this talk, is to say that we have a choice. This is not a foregone conclusion. AR doesn't have to be this dystopian ad tech hellscape. We can choose to say no. I've offered a few different strategies to understand what VR is in this talk, and there's no one right way to look at things, of course. As the saying goes, all models are wrong, but some are useful. And my challenge to you is to go through a similar exercise and focus on what's important to you. So for example, let's say, you could look at VR as being a continuation of this exponential rise in the amount of information you can convey in human communication. If that's important to you, you should be able to understand what opportunities that presents. Alternatively, maybe VR represents another step towards the virtualization of consumption. Maybe this is the way, VR is the way that we can stop people from consuming so much, right? On a burning planet like we have, maybe people buying the avatars instead of clothes is a really positive development for the world. Or maybe, if you're more pessimistic, you see this new medium as presenting yet another ratchet towards the kind of forces that undermine the institutions that we have, that undermine human rights, undermine civil liberties. If that's important to you, this should be a wake-up call, I hope. Well, anyway, what should I do? There's no one answer to this question, of course. I want to try and split it up into 6 different archetypes. So let's see, they are in no particular order: the new, the hungry, the ambitious, the prudent, the jaded, and the skeptical. Go ahead and tag yourself. I'm this guy right here, the jaded, weary one. I would say if you're new to the industry, I would encourage you to get an apprenticeship, to go to meetups, and to not skip slides. Yes, okay. Nope, that's not going to work. Anyway, if you're just starting your career, meet in person. Even though virtual is going to be the future of remote work, I think there's nothing better than a local tech scene. And certainly if you're going to build the thing to replace it, it helps to be here. And this conference certainly is a good example of that. So if you meet anybody else that resonates with this, get their number, meet up. I have no idea what's going on in the background right now. So I think that's the ambitious one. If you feel like you want to get in on this, the thing to remember about gold rushes, like what we're probably going to experience with VR, is that the people getting rich aren't the ones mining, it's the ones selling the shovels. So if you're going to get into this business, sell shovels, sell to businesses, sell things that solve problems. Innovation almost takes a back seat to convenience of sales. So like, it might be more important to be able to accept credit cards and invoices and get SOC2 certification than to have the best product out there. So that's my advice to you for there. The early days, I think, are going to be dominated by companies buying VR headsets to replace people that are exhausted by Zoom meetings. So if you meet them where they are, I think you have a really good opportunity there. If you're prudent, I think the best thing to do is to grind lead code, join a big tech company, and just get paid, right? If you start now, you can be ahead of the pack, and you can get rich, and if you don't mind living in California, it's not a bad life. Just understand that your individual contributions are going to feel small, but this is a guaranteed way to get a front seat at whatever happens next. If you're weary, if you're like me and you joined mobile development right when it was getting started and maybe you don't want to get on the second round, I'm still on the fence myself, maybe make a plan on how to pivot out of this. If apps are not the hot thing, maybe try something else. I can personally recommend security. It's a thing that is never going to go away, software security. So I don't know, Go is a lovely language if you're tired of Swift. And if you're not convinced that AR and VR are the future, I would encourage you to give it a try, especially with this next generation of technology. I'll be giving a masterclass, a workshop tomorrow at 10 a.m. And I encourage anybody that's interested to please attend. And if you have VR headsets or any hardware like that you want to share, feel free to bring it along. It's going to be sort of a collaborative thing. It's going to be mostly non-technical because we could like learn things that are very specific, like metal or whatever, but who knows what the next generation is. I don't want to waste your time on things that might be obsolete. Instead, it's all about thinking through the problems, the things that aren't going to change. So I think it should be a lot of fun, and I encourage anybody to join me tomorrow. So whichever path you take, I hope that you take it with the seriousness and thoughtfulness that is required of this moment. Everyone in this room can help create a future that promotes virtue and happiness and peace, and I'd encourage you to do so. So thanks so much for your attention. Appreciate it. Thanks.
You asked us a question at the start, if we were starting 10 years ago with the knowledge today, what would we build?
Yeah.
What would you build?
Oh my gosh, that's a really good question. Why didn't I think if I can answer ahead of time? I think tying it back to what I was saying before, apps, they just got really boring. If you look at the top 10 lists from the last few years, it's the same Scooby-Doo background. Is that a reference that people get? It's the same repeating background of the same things, right? It's just apps that make teenagers feel really bad about themselves and ways to trade cryptocurrency, right? So I would probably try to make more things like Gowalla or more things like Smart FM, Cerigo, things that present opportunities to explore the world and things that are totally not monetizable. I think we only get that opportunity to explore in those early days before we, figure out how to exploit all that, and it just becomes flooded by, money plays. So that's the best answer I got.
Thanks.
Oh,
Thanks.
Beautiful. Another one? Come on, people, open up. That's your last call. Or you all go to masterclass tomorrow, so you have another chance. We have here a question.
Yes.
Yeah.
Hi, my name is Sven, QA.
Hi.
You said that what we would change 1 decade ago, but what if we changed those things and our life was easier? Maybe we wouldn't be as much as successful as today, because as much more you money have, you pay people to do your basic life things, like cleaning, clothing, and so on, and you jump over the basic human steps in life that you need to go through before you become someone like Bill Gates. He went to college, dropped out, go to college, which he couldn't afford, and so on.
That's a very good question. So, of course, you can't prove counterfactuals. We don't know what the world would be like if we didn't have mobile apps when we did. I would say to that specific point about Bill Gates, I think that's kind of a pernicious myth about these great men in technology. If you look at most of the success stories in America especially, it's not that they got in earlier, they're especially talented. If you look at a lot of them, they got big loans from their rich parents. I think honestly, that's probably the biggest predictors. The best way to succeed is to have rich parents that pay for everything. But I mean, to your point, taking your point seriously, the gig economy is really confusing. I don't know how to honestly deal with that. On one hand, it does provide a working opportunity. I see all these bikes going around, these blue bikes, what are they called? Volt? Just like these silver bikes, it's crazy. And like, of course, we have that in America too. And for folks that don't have other opportunities, this is like a real way for you to make money. But like, I went into a McDonald's yesterday. It was the only place I could get Wi-Fi to call with my family at the time. By the way, the McVegan, I don't think it's actually, I think they just gave me a hamburger. Awful. But I saw a bunch of Volt drivers, and they're just like, they looked really unhappy. Yeah, it's kind of crowded there in the central McDonald's there. But like, it's demeaning work at the same time. So I think we can still, I'm optimistic, right? If you think about like Neil Stephenson, I think the whole thing was like, it's pizza drivers that are competing to like earn money by delivering pizzas into the metaverse or something like that, right? So maybe it's inevitable, but I hope that maybe if we are a little bit more thoughtful about it, we might have a chance. Who knows? A question right there.
Can I go? Yeah. So I have a question. Here.
Oh, so, hi. Sorry.
Yeah, I'm a bit short, so that's not a problem.
I am too.
We're short-sighted, so.
So you have quite an interesting perspective on like mobile development in general. Do you have any books, blogs, posts, anything of that nature that you would recommend to us to read, to expand?
I mean, I think Paul Hudson's kind of the walking, talking authority on these things, so I defer to him in terms of like specific technologies. But I think more specific.
No. More like mindset and the way of thinking.
Yeah. I was a philosophy major in college, so like I'm going to give you some wacky sort of things. Like how wonky do you want to get? Here's a podcast recommendation. Ezra Klein, he's at the New York Times now, but he was the co-founder of Vox. I find his conversations to be endlessly enlightening, and I think a lot, if you go back in the archives, you'll see a lot of the fingerprints of his conversations with philosophers and such. That's a great way to start. I'm going to recommend a book called The Grasshopper. It was a philosophy book from the 1970s that's totally overlooked. But it's this sort of pretentious thing that I had in my bio about any vision of utopia being like staked in play. It comes from that. And it gives this wonderful definition of what games are. That games are this unnecessary thing that you're putting yourself in between you and a goal that you're trying to achieve, and how you can understand life and reality through games and things like that. So I would say go broad. In general, like more like grounded advice, just learn old technologies. There's something called the Lindy effect, which is that the longer a technology exists, the more likely it is to continue existing. I have never regretted like learning SQL, regular expressions, Postgres, things like that, like technologies that aren't going away anytime. You'll never regret that.
Thank you.
Another
question here. Well, this is more of a dystopian question, maybe.
Please.
Okay, so is there like a business opportunity for like communes? There are like people are there that are like addicted to drugs or alcohol that go to reversal to get rid of the addiction. Should they like open up departments where you get rid of VR addiction? Because I have a feeling kids nowadays are really addicted to social media, and I think they're gonna be crazily addicted to VR. I saw in a movie called Upgrade from Netflix, there was a scene where dude was escaping from criminals, went into like a crack house, and on upper floor there were people with VR, and IV was in their blood, and they were like weeks going in VR. And
zombies.
Something like that is kind of realistic to me. People are gonna get addicted. Maybe there should be like people in psychology that should start thinking of methods to get people rid of it. They're using it too much.
Yeah, I mean, I'm coming from Portland, Oregon, and like around my house, fentanyl is just wreaking havoc on our community. Looking around Zagreb, it doesn't seem like y'all have that problem, so I'm very glad that that's not as much a problem here. But like real addiction is something that we're continuing to fight. I'm not as worried about like what virtual reality will have. Like I don't know if you can be addicted to technology in the same way that you can substances. But I would say that like Portland, for example, offers the antidote, which is nature. In the same way, like I heard somebody describing like New York City is the city around a park, but Portland is the park around a city. And the way to cure yourself from virtual reality is to go out into nature, which I don't know, it's a bit reductionistic, but I go on hikes with my daughter and I love it.
So you're not worried at all about this psychological?
I'm worried about a lot of things, but like I'm more interested in like how we can use this technology to fix some of the problems we don't fully understand. So maybe make it worse. It's all a roll of the dice. I actually have a question. So I'm researching like the local Croatian tech scene. Like the name that kept coming up was Photomath. Is somebody here like from Photomath? Yes. Hi. From what I understand about your work, this is really exciting, and I hope you make a VR app. So, more of that, please.
To change the subject. Any more questions, please? Or we reached the end? Please don't be shy. The last opportunity. I will count to 5. Another, yeah. Only a pressure works.
Hi, what's your opinion on Meta and metaverse revival or transition?
I think they're being beat up on the stock market because it's a lot more risky to like try something new than to bilk, people using an algorithm. Can I make like a really weird confession? In like researching for this talk, I found myself liking Mark Zuckerberg a lot more than I expected. So he did an interview with Joe Rogan recently, and he came off as more human and like more just relatable. Just he seemed like an engineer, like he's a smart guy who knows a lot about the space, he cares. And I found myself like, oh shoot, like I like this guy, which is weird. Like that's not what I would have expected. I hope they are successful in making something that pivots. Like I don't like Facebook as a product, but I think like in terms of VR tech, they're really ahead of everybody else. So I wish them well. I hope it turns out okay.
Any more? Here. Here in the first row.
That'd be easier.
That's awesome.
So, did you get any chance to hear about Mattt?
What is that?
Yeah.
Oh, did I just walk into that? Wait, what'd you say?
So, Rimac, maybe for English speakers, it's Rimatt's cars.
Okay.
So he's talking about completely autonomous cars that will drive by themselves. So what do you think, is it really possible in the near future?
And he's from Croatia.
Yeah.
Sorry, okay, yes, yeah, now the name's familiar, yes. I think America has this weird obsession with autonomous vehicles as being a fix-all solution for creating car-centric cities. What I really hope is that we start investing in trains and public infrastructure. E-bikes and scooters are way more efficient than any other form of transportation. The more we can empower people to not have to commute so far to get to where they want to go, maybe virtual reality helps with that. Autonomous vehicles are cool. They're sexy. Like they're something that everybody thinks they want. I would much rather go for something boring that the public can all benefit from. But in the meantime, like EVs are better than internal combustion engines. So, yeah.
Hello. Do you think that we would, for example, half of us from this hall, when it will be that maybe we need to have some VR device like we have smartphones today or the laptop,
when is the turning point when we need it?
Yeah, do you think that everybody will have that in the future, or it will be optional to have VR, for example, for standard living?
I mean, it takes a while. These things take time. I think like if you look at people, how many people like have internet access globally, there's still billions of people that don't. Computers, similarly, it's going to take a long time. I mean, there's going to be a huge jump. In the next decade, we're going to see most of the people that we know are probably going to have that or know somebody who has that, but it'll take time for it to permeate throughout the culture. So we're talking about a time scale of decades. Nothing's inevitable. Something could replace it and supplant it, but, there's a similar trend, and you can kind of track similar technologies to get a good approximation.
Thank you.
But people in this room, creme de la creme.
Oh, absolutely. This is a self-selecting group
years.
of, everybody. Next year, I want to see all headsets.
Next year, okay. Next year, SuperMinds from Superology, everybody with the glasses. Another one here?
Yes.
Now we're talking.
Is this on? Oh, okay, it is. During this pandemic, we've seen a jump to remote learning by, let's say, a necessity. Do you see VR and AR as, let's say, a level up in education in the future?
It's certainly better than the alternative. Fortunately, my kids are young enough that they didn't have to do the remote learning thing. Instead, it was just I didn't get as much childcare as I might have wanted. But as I understand it, the experience of being in front of rectangles with people's faces is just as awkward as it is for us doing it. What I'm looking forward to is being able to replace Zoom with something like Horizon's Workspaces or whatever Apple introduces, or VR chat. Well, VR chat's weird. I don't think I want to be like an anime character, but it's better, especially if you're making eye contact. I think that could be really cool and a little less awkward than Zoom, where you're just looking at your face, but you want to make sure that it doesn't look like you're looking at your face all the time. In VR, you can't do that. But about education in particular, I think there's a really, if you look at the really compelling AR cases, there are things where they can make the ceiling go away and you can see the stars, or you can see a globe in front of you and interact with it. That's the cool thing, is that you can introduce physical props without any cost. So really excited about that.
We've had AR on phones for a while, and I feel like it hasn't taken off yet, unless you count video effects for TikTok or stuff like that. Why do you think is that? Is it because we need to have screens glued to our eyes, or something else?
That's absolutely right. Yeah, I think that's exactly the reason. So in the same way that Shazam technically worked, because that's kind of like a mobile app, or you had these mobile phone-based things, they were used, but they weren't ubiquitous. I think the AR cases that we see today, if you go on Snapchat, you can give yourself body dysmorphia if you're posting selfies. You can shop for things I think glasses and shoes are really big. But those are the things. They're sort of things that you're scaffolding on to things you'd already be doing on a phone. And I think this next generation of hardware, that'll be the thing where all of a sudden it's a lot less awkward. Just in the same way that you wouldn't dial a number and hold up your phone to get an app is so much more natural. So I'm hoping, or what I think is going to happen, is that with dedicated hardware, we're going to see a lot more AR.
Another one? Anyone? Yeah, well. Okay, that means that we reached the end.
Thank goodness. I think I'm talking out of my ass right now. So thank you so much.
One big round of applause for Mattt.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.